Sign it, Ethan. Sign away your shares, or I swear to God, you'll never see Clara again. Damien's voice cracked through the phone like broken glass. Ethan stood in the rain outside the abandoned warehouse, water streaming down his face, his phone trembling in his hand. This was supposed to be the night of his redemption, the night he finally proved everyone wrong. But now, the woman he loved sat bound to a chair somewhere in that dark building, and his brother-in-law, the man who had mocked him at every family dinner for 3 years, held all the cards. But let's rewind. Let's go back to where it all started, to the night Ethan Cross learned what humiliation truly felt like. The Sinclair family estate gleamed under crystal chandeliers, every surface polished to perfection, every guest dressed in clothes that cost more than Ethan earned in a month. He sat at the far end of the mahogany dining table, picking at his filet mignon, while conversation flowed around him like he wasn't even there. Clara, his wife, sat beside him, her hand occasionally finding his under the table, squeezing gently. She was his anchor in this sea of judgment. Victor Sinclair, Clara's father, raised his wine glass. His silver hair caught the light as he surveyed his empire, his family, his world. To another successful quarter at Sinclair Industries, he announced. 32% growth. Damien's acquisition strategy continues to exceed expectations. Everyone applauded. Damien, Clara's older brother, stood and bowed slightly, his smile sharp as a knife. Thank you, Father. Though I must say, some investments are clearly wiser than others. His eyes landed on Ethan. The table went quiet. Victor's expression darkened with what might have been amusement. Are we discussing poor investment strategies, son? Well, Father, I wouldn't want to embarrass anyone, Damien said, swirling his wine. But perhaps we could ask Ethan about his cryptocurrency venture. How much did you lose again? Was it 200,000? 300? Ethan's jaw tightened. Clara's hand gripped his harder. Damien, that's enough, she said. No, I'm genuinely curious, Damien continued, leaning forward. Because you see, Ethan came to me 2 years ago asking for investment advice. I told him, don't put your money into digital fairy dust. I told him to invest in something tangible, something real. But did he listen? Victor chuckled, a sound like grinding stone. A man who loses his family's savings to computer code shouldn't be offering business opinions at family gatherings. Laughter rippled around the table. Not everyone laughed. Clara didn't. Neither did her mother, Margaret, whose eyes held something that might have been pity. But enough people laughed to make Ethan's face burn with shame. I still believe in the technology, Ethan said quietly. The market was volatile, but the fundamentals. The fundamentals, Damien mocked. Listen to him. Ethan, you're a mid-level accountant at a pharmaceutical company. What do you know about fundamentals? You gambled with money you couldn't afford to lose, and you lost. That's not investing. That's stupidity. Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I think Clara and I should go. Sit down, Victor commanded. Dinner isn't finished. Neither is my dignity, Ethan replied. He looked at Clara. Are you coming? She stood immediately, her emerald dress shimmering. Good night, everyone. As they walked toward the door, Victor's voice followed them. Clara, you married beneath you. Every day you stay with that man, you prove it. The drive home was silent. Rain began to fall, matching the storm inside Ethan's chest. When they reached their modest apartment, Clara finally spoke. Don't listen to them. They don't define your worth. Don't they? Ethan collapsed onto the couch. Your father's right. I lost everything we had. I'm a joke to them. You're not a joke to me. Clara knelt in front of him, taking his hands. You took a risk. It didn't work out. That doesn't make you less than them. But Ethan barely heard her. His mind was spiraling through memories of the crypto crash, the wallet he'd abandoned, the forum posts he'd written about holding through the storm before he'd finally given up. He'd deleted all the apps, all the bookmarks, tried to forget the whole disaster. That night, he couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, he sat in his home office, staring at his laptop. Something nagged at him, a memory he couldn't quite grasp. He opened his old external hard drive, the one he'd used before switching to computers. Files and folders from 3 years ago, digital archaeology of his former life. There, a folder labeled Crypto Backup 2019. His heart began to race. He'd forgotten about this. When he'd panic sold most of his holdings during the crash, he'd been so desperate to salvage something, anything, that he'd moved some coins to a new wallet, telling himself he'd leave them as a lesson in humility. Then, he'd formatted his computer and forgotten they existed. He clicked the folder. Inside was a wallet file and a password document. His hands shook as he downloaded the latest version of the wallet software. The installation felt like it took hours. Finally, he opened the file and entered his password. The screen flickered. Then numbers appeared. 43,782 coins. Ethan stared. That couldn't be right. He opened a new browser window and checked the current price, $1,200 per coin. He did the math 3 times, then 4 times. Then he used a calculator. $52,538,400. Ethan stood up so fast his chair fell over. The crash woke Clara. She appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He couldn't speak. He just pointed at the screen. Clara walked over, looked, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Is this real?" "I forgot," Ethan whispered. "I forgot I had them. I bought them when they were $37 each. I was going to hold them forever. Be patient. Believe in the technology." Then the crash happened, and I panicked and sold most of them. "But I moved these to cold storage and forgot." Clara started laughing, then crying, then laughing again. Ethan, do you understand what this means?" He understood. But more than the money, something else crystallized in his mind. He thought of Damien's mocking smile, Victor's contempt, the years of being treated like he didn't belong. And suddenly, he knew exactly what he was going to do. The next morning, Ethan made phone calls. Lots of phone calls. To lawyers, accountants, investment advisors. Within a week, he'd liquidated $15 million worth of his holdings. Within 2 weeks, he'd learned something interesting. Sinclair Industries was privately held, and Victor Sinclair, for all his bluster, had been quietly shopping for investors. The company was struggling. Their last quarter hadn't been growth. It had been creative accounting. Ethan bought 47% of Sinclair Industries through a shell corporation. He became the majority shareholder. And then he scheduled a board meeting. The day he walked into the Sinclair Industries boardroom, wearing a Tom Ford suit and carrying a leather portfolio, the looks on their faces made every humiliation worth it. Damien actually stood up, his face red. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Sit down, Mr. Sinclair," Ethan said calmly. He moved to the head of the table, where Victor usually sat. "Gentlemen, ladies, my name is Ethan Cross. As of this morning, I own 47% of this company. Victor owns 28%. The remaining shares are split among the board, which means effectively, I'm now in charge." Victor's face had gone pale. "This is impossible. How did you—" "Cryptocurrency," Ethan said, allowing himself a small smile. "Those digital fairy dust investments you mocked, they performed remarkably well. Turns out the fundamentals were sound after all." The next hour was glorious. Ethan presented his vision. A complete overhaul of Sinclair Industries' outdated business model, investment in green technology, partnership with Clara's sustainable design firm to create a new product line. The board, seeing the cash injection and growth potential, voted unanimously in his favor. Damien stormed out. Victor sat in stunned silence. But Ethan had underestimated his brother-in-law's desperation. 2 weeks later, there was an incident at the company's main factory. Chemical spills, equipment sabotage, injuries. Ethan reviewed the security footage himself and felt his blood run cold. There was Damien, paying off a plant supervisor, tampering with safety equipment. The next board meeting was even more dramatic. Ethan played the footage. "This is attempted murder," he said quietly. "These are our employees, your employees. And you were willing to hurt them, possibly kill them, to sabotage me." Damien's lawyer tried to object, but the evidence was irrefutable. The board voted to remove Damien entirely from the company and press criminal charges. As security escorted him out, Damien's eyes held pure hatred. "You've made an enemy," Victor said after the meeting. It wasn't a threat. It sounded almost like a warning, maybe even the first hint of respect. "I've had an enemy," Ethan replied. "I just finally decided to stop pretending we were family. That should have been the end. Ethan should have known it wasn't." 3 days later, Clara didn't come home from work. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Then, Ethan's phone rang from an unknown number. Which brings us back to the warehouse, to to the rain, to Damien's desperate voice demanding Ethan sign over his shares. "Where is she?" Ethan asked, water running into his eyes. "Inside, and she stays inside until you transfer those shares back to the family. All of them. You humiliated us, Ethan. You made us look like fools." "I didn't make you anything," Ethan said. "You did that yourselves." He was stalling. His smartwatch, the expensive one he'd bought last week, had a feature he'd never thought he'd need. With subtle movements, he activated the emergency location sharing to the police. "If I give you the shares, how do I know you'll let her go?" "You don't, but it's your only option." Ethan took a breath. "I'm coming in. We'll do the transfer face-to-face." He pushed open the warehouse door. It creaked like something from a horror movie. Inside, Clara sat bound to a chair in the center of the space, duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. Damien stood behind her, looking disheveled and manic, nothing like the polished executive from family dinners. "The tablet," Damien demanded. "Transfer the shares. Now." Ethan pulled out his tablet and opened the corporate portal. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately. "This will take a few minutes to process." "Then you better type faster." "Damien," Ethan said, "I need you to understand something. I never wanted to destroy you. I just wanted respect." "Respect?" Damien laughed. "From people like us? You're nobody, Ethan. You got lucky with some computer money. That doesn't make you one of us." "No," Ethan agreed. "It makes me better than you, because I earned what I have. You were just born into it, and you still managed to lose it." Damien's hand moved to his pocket. Ethan tensed, but before anything could happen, the warehouse flooded with light. Police cars, their sirens splitting the night. Officers poured in through every entrance. "Drop whatever you're holding. Hands up." Damien spun, confused, trapped. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Within seconds, officers had him on the ground. Ethan ran to Clara, pulling the tape from her mouth gently, untying her wrists. She collapsed into him, sobbing. "I thought he'd kill you. I thought. I know. It's over now." 6 months later, Ethan stood on the balcony of the Sinclair Industries headquarters, watching the sunset paint the city gold. The company had tripled its valuation. Clara's sustainable design line had launched to international acclaim. Even Victor had grudgingly admitted in his own way that Ethan had done well. Behind him, the charity gala was in full swing. Sinclair Industries' new direction had attracted attention, partnerships, and tonight they were celebrating the opening of a worker wellness center at the factory, paid for entirely by Ethan's personal funds. Clara joined him on the balcony, slipping her hand into his. "Happy?" "Getting there," Ethan said. He thought about that night at the family dinner, how small he'd felt, how worthless. "You know what's strange? I don't hate them anymore. I don't even think about them much." "That's called peace," Clara said, smiling. Ethan pulled her close. "No, that's called winning." Inside, Victor Sinclair raised a toast to the new direction of his family's company. It wasn't the empire he'd built, not anymore. It was something different, something better. And though it hurt his pride to admit it, his son-in-law had saved them all. True inheritance, Ethan had learned, wasn't money or status or family name. It was knowing your worth when everyone else forgets it. It was staying true to yourself when the world demands you become someone else. And it was loving people not because they deserve it, but because you choose to. The story of how Ethan Cross went from family disgrace to billionaire CEO spread through business circles like wildfire. But Ethan never told it himself. He was too busy building something that mattered, too focused on the future to dwell on the past. And on quiet nights, when Clara asked him if he'd do it all again, if he'd suffer through those humiliations knowing what came after, he always said yes. Because the man who walked out of that warehouse carrying his wife wasn't the same man who'd sat silent at that family dinner. And that transformation, that growth, was worth more than any amount of cryptocurrency could ever buy. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling us about a time you proved the doubters wrong, and smash that like button if you believe in second chances and redemption. More incredible stories of triumph are coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. Until next time, remember, your value isn't determined by those who refuse to see it. Keep going. Keep believing. Your moment is coming.